So last day we were talking about bacteria, and in particular we had talked a lot about E. coli. So remember that bacteria are not plants, they are prokaryotes, so single-celled organisms with no nucleus. We talked about, of course, E. coli and how it's a normal organism that's part of your intestine, although sometimes it might make you sick, and generally we're talking about gastrointestinal symptoms. So the biggest one is diarrhea and sometimes vomiting. Sometimes that diarrhea might be bloody, sometimes not. It kind of depends on the strain. And the contamination is from feces, so animal or human feces. We also talked a little bit about Shigella and Salmonella, which are kind of like E. coli. They're bacteria, and they are involved in contaminated water or food. Salmonella tends to be a little bit more associated with food contamination, and sometimes it's called food poisoning. But we're talking about, again, gastrointestinal symptoms, cramps, vomiting, diarrhea, those kind of things. So I want to talk a little bit about Legionella. And Legionella is, it was named actually after a Legionnaire's convention. So Legionnaire is somebody who used to serve in the military. And so a bunch of these people were at a convention. And what happened was that the bacterium got into, I'm not exactly sure how they work, but an air conditioning unit and got misted, ended up in their lungs. So one of the differences between Legionella and a lot of the other waterborne bacteria is that Legionella doesn't typically cause a drinking water disease because you're not getting it by drinking it. You're getting it by inhaling a mist. So you can see here, here's a couple of fellows having a hot tub in the back of a pickup truck. I've never done this before, but I thought it was kind of a cool idea. And so this is actually one of the common causes of Legionella, is that people have hot tubs and it makes mists. And if you're not properly cleaning it and using the chemicals, Legionella, well, it likes a nice warm place to grow. And it can grow there if it's not cleaned properly, and people can inhale it from the mist. So this is what Legionella looks like. It's a gram-negative organism and causing kind of typical respiratory symptoms. It gets in the lungs and basically causes pneumonia. So chest pains and fevers and coughs and things like that. You can see it has another name, Pontiac fever. So another organism I want to talk about, it's not going to be on the test, by the way, but it's really important worldwide, is cholera. And Vibrio cholera is the organism, and it's pretty common in a lot of developing countries, in particular, probably places most common is India and Pakistan. Again, contaminated water. And this causes a really nasty diarrhea. Basically, the floodgates are open, and some people can actually die from severe dehydration within 24 hours. So the cure is, or solution is, to rehydrate these people, and not just rehydrate them with water, but also with salts. So there's a lot of recipes on the internet you can find, and it's basically water and salt. And usually there's a banana thrown in there because salt water kind of tastes bad, and the banana also adds extra potassium to help replenish the person's electrolytes. So here's a list of a bunch of bacterial diseases. Like I said, this is not necessarily all of them. This is just some of the more common ones. And the ones with stars are the ones that you should know. And you can see that every single one of them has gastrointestinal symptoms except for Legionella, which is usually more of a pneumonia kind of symptom. You can see it does talk about diarrhea there, but that's more of a rare thing. So maybe I shouldn't have bolded it on the slide. Here's a slide just showing the different causes. So bacteria, of course, includes this red wedge, which include E. coli and a bunch of others. Legionella is this blue wedge. And these other things are other types of organisms, so parasites and viruses. And this is just showing the symptoms. So most of the symptoms are gastrointestinal on the left, or the respiratory from Legionella on the right. And you can see there's a few other things in the small wedges, like hepatitis, for example. So I want to finish up today talking about protozoan diseases. And hopefully everyone knows what a protist is. And you can see I have the word protozoan here. So usually we talk about the word protist. So let me spell that out for you. I don't know what I did with my pen. Protist is P-R. I'm going to do this with my mouse. So you probably talk about protists a little bit in biology 108. And this is the word that us biologists like to use. So what is a protist? Protist is a eukaryote, so it has no nucleus, or sorry, it has a nucleus, and it's not an animal, it's not a plant, and it's not a fungi. So that's sort of a catch-all for everything that's not a plant, animal, or fungi that has a nucleus. So it's not a bacterium. Bacteria are prokaryotes, of course. Most protists are unicellular, and this other term here, protozoan, is an older term. Biologists don't like it. It means animal-like protist. And so what does animal-like even mean is kind of the question, but it's still stuck in medical communities. We talk about protozoan parasites. So you can see the three that we're going to talk about are Giardia, Entamoeba, and Cryptosporidium. And they all have some things in common, and that's that they can form these things called cysts. So a cyst is a sort of a dormant state of the organism. So it's not growing or metabolizing. It's kind of like a seed, I guess you could think of it as one way. And so basically it's dormant, and maybe the most important thing to note is that they're very tough and they're resistant to water chlorination. So if you've ever had a water boil advisory in your community, it might be because of one of these organisms here, because they know that boiling water can kill these things, but not the chlorination. So the first one here that's worth talking about is Giardia. And unfortunately, that little video doesn't seem to be playing for me. Sorry about that. It's kind of a cool looking organism. It has two nuclei, all these flagella. I think it looks a lot like a weird little alien. So another name for Giardia, by the way, is called beaver fever. And so if you take a look at the life cycle, what you're looking at here is basically somebody defecates. So that somebody could be an animal, which is usually the case when we're getting Giardia, or a human in some cases. And you can see at the bottom of the slide, you can see there's a cyst, and the cyst will survive out in the environment very, very well. So eventually somebody, a human or animal, is going to drink it, and then it basically comes to life in the intestine and germinates to a form called a trophozoite, and that's what causes the diarrhea. So where and when are people getting this? A few different cases. So sometimes people get it from camping or something like that, where they're drinking, contaminated water out in the wilderness. And the other case is from traveling. So traveler's diarrhea, and we mean by traveling to places where the water is contaminated with feces. So if you ever go and travel to a warm location for a holiday and you have traveler's diarrhea, and if it clears after a few days, 2 or 3 days, it was probably E. coli. If it's still here for a week or two, it's probably Giardia, and you should go get yourself some medicine. So it, like I said, causes sort of a longer term traveler's diarrhea. It does clear eventually, but the medication helps speed the whole thing up quite a bit. There's some nice pictures of Giardia. You can see the two nuclei there. I think it's a pretty cool looking organism. And if you want to dress up for Halloween, there's a costume idea for next October. So another place where sometimes people are familiar with Giardia is the spring melt and basically getting your pet sick. So spring melt just basically means in the spring you've got animal feces on the ground, and you've got the snow melting everything, and it runs into puddles and ponds, and animals drink it and they get diarrhea. And again, same thing. If they have diarrhea chronically for many days, like a week or more, it could be Giardia, and it's pretty common in dogs. All right, so another organism to talk about are these amoebas. And again, my video doesn't seem to want to run for me. This is supposed to be a video here in the bottom left. An amoeba is an organism that can move its cytoplasm to help it crawl around. They're very cool. Look up amoeba on YouTube. You'll find all sorts of very cool videos. So really bottom line is this is a very similar kind of life cycle. You've got an animal or human that poops it out. The cysts survive in the environment. Somebody consumes the cysts and they get sick. The big difference here is that this is actually causing something called dysentery. So I can underline that. I thought I could underline. There we go. And that basically means bloody diarrhea. So you may have heard of it. Sometimes they talk about people in like World War I movies. They're in the trenches and they get dysentery. And this is basically what they're talking about. There's a Far Side cartoon for you, and you can see some folks in the lab, and he says, "What? This is lemonade. Where's my culture of amoebic dysentery?" And this is why we don't drink or eat food in the lab, I guess. All right, so the last one I want to talk about today was Cryptosporidium. So it's the same theme as Giardia and the amoebic dysentery in that it forms a cyst, and the cyst is resistant, and people can consume it. You can see in this case, actually, they're showing somebody swimming and getting it that way, right? You know, if you're swimming out in the lake, it's possible that there's animal feces in that lake. This one tends to be associated with wildlife and sometimes cattle. So sometimes cow manure will contaminate a drinking source, or I guess in the example given here, a swimming water source. And they get sick, and we're talking about diarrhea again. So that is all the time we have for today. I hope the test went well, and we'll pick this up on Wednesday where we left off.